Thank you and welcome to this week's video. This week we are looking at an engraving, a copper engraving by Matthäus Merian the Elder, and it depicts the parable of the talents executed in around 1630, and it's a small engraving about 15 by 20 centimeters. So who was Matthäus Merian the Elder? He was an engraver and a book dealer. He was born in 1593 and he was the leading illustrator of the 17th century in German book making. And they referred to him as the Elder because he also had a son later on who took over his business and became a very good illustrator and painter in his own right. Between 1625 and 1630, Merian published illustrations to the Bible with texts by Martin Luther. And here is an image of the title page and a binding of a copy of one of these early 1630 examples of the Bible. So the technique used here is etching. And etching means that the original design would have been incised by acid into a metal plate, a copper plate in this instance. And the design is drawn with a very sharp tool into the etching ground, thus giving the final image this very particular graphic appearance. So what they would have done is then basically sort of put the ink, the black ink, into the etched plate with the incised decoration in it, and then roll over a sheet, and then basically the design would be printed thus onto the sheet. So the subject matter is the parable of the talents. It's Jesus's teaching here is that one's life should always bear fruit. One has to nurture the gifts that God has given to him, so no matter how many or few he has received. And this parable was very popular in the Middle Ages, and it became so popular that the word talent, which originally designated an ancient coin, has become synonymous in common language with our natural aptitudes and qualities, and basically the usage of the word talent as we use it nowadays. Looking closer at the composition and the characters there, you can see that it's set in an imaginary setting, mixing antique and 17th century architecture. And the scene is actually relatively accurate, a relatively accurate transcription of Matthew's Gospel description. To the left you can see seated in an ornate chair under a canopy and dressed in luxurious drapery, the Master. His guards and his assistants stand behind him at a large table, and one of them is even seated and is counting the money under his master's careful watch. Then, in the middle of the composition, the first servant coming forward to present his fruits of his work. And just behind him is a second servant coming forward with his profits too. So he might be the second servant, the one who received 2 talents. So they're all waiting here to see the master. And then in the background, you can see a third servant, which is the one who received a single talent. He's rushing to unbury the talent he was given just before presenting him to his master in those words, "Out of fear I went off and buried your talent in the ground. Here it is back." In conclusion, we can say that this image really was an invitation for the 17th century reader, and still is one for us today, to reflect which one of these 3 servants are we. As per Pope Francis's own words, he says, "Have you thought about the talents that God has given you? Have you thought of how you can put them at the service of others? Do not bury your talents, and set your stakes on great ideals, the ideals that enlarge the heart, the ideals of service that will make your talents fruitful." Thank you very much for watching this week's video, and we look forward to welcoming you next week again. Thank you. Goodbye.